Hi, I'm Patty Schetter, Coordinator of Autism Education Initiatives for the Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. Today we're going to share some information to help parents better understand their educational or IEP team. The goals of this presentation are to help parents learn who might be on their child's educational team once the child has been made eligible for special education, and to help parents understand the role of each team member and what services each team member may provide. A child's IEP team can be made up of many different team members and providers, depending on the specific needs and services required for each unique child. One important thing to know is that your child is at the center of the IEP team and is really the most important member of the team, whether or not he or she is able to participate in the meeting yet or not. His or her needs are what determine who from the school should be involved in the educational team and what skills or goals they should be working on. Parents are also an essential part of the IEP team because you are the people who know your child best, and you are the people who can really advocate for your child's educational needs. It's important for you to be familiar with each of the people on your child's team and be familiar with what they do. Each child who has an IEP is assigned an educational case manager who helps to coordinate the team and ensures that the IEP is being implemented. This person is usually a special education teacher, but if your child has an IEP for speech and language only, the case manager may be a speech therapist. The case manager is the person who can help you learn about who else is on your child's team and is typically the first person you should go to with your questions. Each IEP team also has an administrator who's involved, such as an assistant principal or special education program manager. Usually this person has been given the authority to allocate the needed resources decided on by the IEP team. A student's team should also have a general education teacher involved, who's able to explain the expectations of students for that grade level, and they can assist the team with determining how a student with an IEP can best access the general education curriculum. Other specialists and service providers may also be a part of the IEP team, including a school psychologist, speech-language specialist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, adaptive PE teacher, or social worker or counselor. As I said before, it will depend on the needs of the individual child and the goals that have been developed for him or her. Now let's hear from some of these professionals so you can learn more about what each provider does when they are a part of a child's educational team.
When working with a child with autism and being part of the assessment team, really important for me not only to understand the language that they do have available to them in terms of their pragmatic language, but then how they actually utilize that in real-time situations. Because oftentimes I will be testing a student and he does fantastic on the standardized assessments I've given him, but then when I'm out working with him, watching him interact with his peers, seeing him in the cafeteria, seeing him in the classroom setting, that's when I pick up on the fact that he's really struggling. Even though sitting across the table from me in the assessment process, he's able to give me those right answers. But I'm not seeing it in real time when it really counts. So as the assessor of a student of autism, from the speech perspective, I really have to understand that piece and go after those observations and those discussions and asking other people what they're seeing with the student, the parents, the teachers, the aides in the room. All of those people are really crucial to my investigation on the student, but not just to look at his standardized scores, because oftentimes, especially with children with autism, that doesn't tell the story. It's part of the story, but it's not the full story. What's important about that is the more we know about the kid, then we can build the plans that make sense for the kid. We can build in the accommodations if needed. We can understand what goals we really should be setting. And as a team, everybody who's working with the kid can make more concise and appropriate goals. So once we have established those goals, my role, our role as SLPs can range from building speech generating devices that allow nonverbal students to access their day and to be able to tell people, hey, I need to use the bathroom, I need a break, I need no more, I can't do it anymore. Really try to work on having them be able to connect with the people in the room. And that's what we're after. We're after this when the children are in their day, during their day, when they're with us, that we are allowing them the opportunities to connect with other human beings, either using their voice or using a system, a speech generating device to do that. It's incredibly powerful for our students to be able to let people know what they're thinking and why they're thinking it or what their needs are. And without our support, oftentimes that can't be done. I want, and what I really strive for every day, is an openness to their ideas and then a willingness to accept where they're coming from, because it's not always easy for me. I think, well, speech, communication, that's the ticket, but it's not. If I don't have the behavior in line, if their sensory systems are all not regulated, if the aides aren't on board with what I'm trying to do, none of it works. So it's incredibly important to have a strong team and have a team that's willing and able to and wanting to connect with each other and accept each other's perspectives. We are good by ourselves, but we can be amazing when we work together, and that's what I've seen over the past years. What I've learned is that when I've started really collaborating and working with other people, that's when I saw the growth in my kids. And when I was working hand in hand with the psych in the beginning of the evaluation, and we did good treatment, we understood the kid better, and then worked with the occupational therapist or behaviorist as we went on and working with these kids in the classroom, with the teachers and the aides, that's what works. I am so grateful for their work and their help all these years, because it's really been a team effort, and that's why we are treating children with autism more effectively, and we're seeing such growth in that population now.
So as a school psychologist in an educational setting on an autism treatment team, I tend to be very involved in the beginning with the assessment piece of it. And my main role and responsibility is really to assess for special education eligibility, looking at the autism criteria. I'm also gathering information, really to use that information in determining appropriate goals for that student, what are appropriate accommodations in the classroom setting, and looking at the best program placement for that child. More specifically, when I'm doing an assessment, I am looking at cognitive functioning, I'm looking at processing, as well as things like executive functioning. I am gathering social, emotional, behavioral data and providing that to the IEP team. So when I go in and I do an assessment, I do a thorough review of records. That includes looking at school records, any private evaluations that have been done, and also includes looking at the child's medical records and any possible diagnoses. I then do observations in both structured and unstructured settings. I want to look and see, how is this child doing in a classroom? How are they doing with a directed lesson? I also want to look at their peer interactions. How are they interacting with other children in the lunchroom, on the playground? I do a student interview, I do a parent interview, I do a teacher interview. I also do a number of social, emotional, and behavioral rating scales, including adaptive behavior. These are given to parents and teachers. If the child, depending upon the child's age and cognitive functioning, I'll also do self-report scales with them. One of my other roles as a school psychologist in working with kids with autism is dealing with behavior issues and helping support staff in best addressing those. Sometimes that takes the form of consultation with the classroom teacher. Sometimes I'm providing direct services to a student to address behavior. Sometimes the district will call in an outside behaviorist, and in that case, I tend to have the history with the student and knowledge of how the behavior has changed over time. And I work more in the capacity of a liaison between the school and the behaviorist, and really providing them with the information that they need to complete a functional behavior assessment and develop a behavior intervention plan. With respect to meeting the psychological needs of a student with autism, we find often kids with ASD have anxiety issues, they have difficulties with emotional regulation, and they also struggle with coping skills. My role then might be as a direct service provider, working with the child to develop skills within that area. Obviously, I'm consulting with the classroom teacher as well in terms of providing appropriate supports in the classroom to help them be more successful and not let those things get in the way of their learning. And then, of course, working closely with the family. I want to know, is this child also struggling with anxiety at home? Is it taking a different form? And if that student is involved with outside service providers or an outside therapist, I'm going to be working collaboratively with them so we can take more of a holistic approach in best meeting that student's needs both in the educational and home environment. While I absolutely love working with the children, I have to say that collaborating with other specialists to really figure out what's going on with the child is one of my favorite parts of this job. So with respect to that collaborative piece and really working with the other specialists on the team to best meet the needs of the student, I was recently working with a speech and language therapist, and while I was sharing my information about the peer support group that he had and how excited I was to see this student out on the playground, that his friends were including him, they were inviting him to be a part of the activities. In the classroom, they were engaging with him during cooperative activities. She also spoke to the peer group, but for her it was more of a concern because she was sharing they loved him so much, they never called him out on anything. So they didn't question it when he didn't look them in the eye, and they didn't question it when he mumbled or started talking softer when he was speaking to them. And so as we were sharing our information, we were able to collaboratively develop peer coaching with this group of peers who already wanted to help him be successful, and how best to train those peers so that they can really help the student further his communication skills.
Behavior analysts provide services to individuals with autism in a variety of different contexts and for a variety of different reasons. It can look different depending on the situation or circumstance in which the behavior analyst is providing the service. In a school setting, a behavior analyst might be asked to conduct a functional behavior assessment when an IEP team determines that the child has behavior that's interfering with their learning or the learning of others. And the strategies within the IEP haven't been effective in addressing that behavior. So the IEP team initiates the intervention with the behavior analyst, who would come in and support the team in assessing the interfering behavior and looking at the antecedents, the possible triggers, looking at the consequences or outcomes in order to determine the function that that behavior might serve. And then the behavior analyst would assist the IEP team in developing a positive behavior support plan. They might also train staff in how to implement the strategies that are a part of the behavior support plan and set up a monitoring system or a data collection system that the team would use in order to determine if the plan was effective.
As an occupational therapist, I've worked both in a clinic setting and in the school setting. And in the school setting, as part of an autism treatment team, that can look very different for an occupational therapist. We may be part of the initial assessment process. So we're sharing information with the school psychologist. If they're looking at visual motor assessment for fine motor skills, we're definitely going to be looking at the sensory processing component for that child, how they're processing sensory information in the classroom environment, how they're processing sensory information out on the playground, what happens during transitions. When that child transitions from the classroom to the library, even how they transition in the morning or going home when we're looking at that sensory processing piece. We're also going to look at that child's motor planning skills, so gross motor, fine motor skills, but not just the skill itself. How do they execute new motor tasks? So that's part of that initial assessment. So just like a speech pathologist or psychologist or behaviorist is gathering that initial assessment information, it's observations, it's standardized tests if that child is able to complete those standardized tests. It's parent interview and also talking to the teachers and other staff at that school who work with that child to get that initial assessment information. And then we present that information at an IEP team meeting with parent input and looking at educational goals for that child. And now at that point, my role may change. I may become more of a consultant for that child, looking at consulting on specific fine motor or handwriting goals in the classroom, or consulting on the sensory processing aspect of it and how it impacts that child's behavior. When I'm working directly with a student, it's really important that I look at how my intervention is impacting them positively in the classroom, how they're better able to carry out educational activities. And if it's not, then I want to really look at how I change that intervention. And in the clinic setting, it's a little bit different because that is always going to be a one-on-one situation that you're working with the child and then communicating directly with the parents on interventions, and they're communicating with the school staff. Most importantly, when we're looking at working as part of an autism treatment team as occupational therapists in the schools, is really understanding who's spending the most time with that child. So the teacher who's in the classroom, we don't want to be utilizing interventions that we know are effective in a one-on-one treatment situation and then not sharing that information with the classroom teacher. And it's not just sharing information. Okay, here you go. Here's 30 vestibular activities because this child has difficulty processing balance information. I used to do that 20-something years ago until I learned that a teacher doesn't know that information until someone shows them how to utilize that strategy. So it's not just telling someone or saying, hey, you could do this strategy. It's showing them how that works in the classroom environment and why that is, why that works, the why behind the strategy, I always say. So for me, it's exciting to be part of an autism treatment team because I learn a lot and I feel like I can offer a lot as part of that team as an occupational therapist.
Now that you've learned more about what some of the professionals may provide, we want to remind you that you are a critical team member as well. Your role on the team includes partnering with other team members to plan your child's instruction, sharing your goals and your concerns and asking questions, and also giving input. When your child is transitioning to a new school or classroom, it's important that you reach out to new team members and let them know how involved you want to be and what information you need from them. So let's end by hearing from some parents about how they've been able to successfully advocate for their child and be an active member of their IEP team.
A strong team really has the idea that everyone has an important role and doesn't devalue anyone's particular role. It really is going to take a strong team in order to get the child to where they need to be. So I would say advice to service providers would be to value the role that the parent plays on the team. And that doesn't mean, giving them any more or any less weight when it comes to decisions, but really respecting and including them in that. And so in all the decisions that really are having to do with the child. So I would say the advice would be to keep a strong way of communication, set up a strong mechanisms of two-way communication with the family, making sure that they are fully informed and really empowered and know what's happening and with their child and their role and being able to support those efforts. And as well as, just really working in a collaborative manner. So always looking out for ways to work in a manner where, there's listening and there's respectful interactions. So I think that's a big part of it, and as well as doing their homework and doing their research. So, learning about the family and their culture and their viewpoints that might be a little bit different than theirs, because that really is going to shape, how you interact with the family and what are some of the family values and what's going to be, what that IEP might look like as a result. So I think that there's, that would be my advice to a service provider. Well, I would say my experience is that it's tempting for the parent to take on many roles as a part of the treatment team. It's tempting to want to be the therapist and want to be, the person that figures out, what services are necessary. But I would say that honestly, the most valuable role that the parent has is being the expert of the child. In our experience with our son, I think it was very important to have the background to know how to research and to be able to, know what was evidence-based practice, which is a part of some of the team members' responsibilities, but parents also need to have that experience also and know how to do that. As well as, you may have to know how to do some of the therapy in order to continue it on at home and in other places and generalize it. But that's not the primary role. The primary role really has to do with being the expert of your child, having the skills and I would say even the courage to know how to advocate for your child. At the end of the day, you're really the only person that will be around that IEP team table and will never leave. It's the most consistent member of the team, the parent is. And so as a result, I think an empowered parent is one that understands that role and understands how you are the person that's going to see this from the beginning to the end. So you have that perspective to give to the team, which is invaluable. There's such a big part of having that perspective to bring to the team. So I think the parent's role is a big one, and it's something that we really, I think a good team recognizes, respects, and appreciates.
The UC Davis Mind Institute was created in 1998 with a promise to find cures for neurodevelopmental disorders. Every day, our physicians and researchers come closer to fulfilling that promise. Their groundbreaking research on autism, Fragile X syndrome, chromosome 22q11.2 deletion syndrome, ADHD, and other brain disorders are helping children achieve their fullest potential. Please visit our website to find out more about current studies, upcoming events, and how you can help make a difference.